The rain hammered against the windows of my cramped studio apartment in Queens, New York, as I hunched over my laptop at 2:47 a.m. The glow from the screen illuminated the dark circles under my eyes. Another sleepless night fueled by instant coffee and determination. The sound of the storm outside seemed to echo the chaos in my mind as I juggled 3 different business ideas simultaneously, each one demanding my complete attention, while offering no guarantee of success. While most people my age were out, partying in Manhattan's trendy bars or sleeping peacefully in their comfortable beds, I was here, grinding away at something nobody believed in, not even my own family. The apartment itself told the story of my sacrifices, where other 20-somethings might have invested in a comfortable couch or a decent bed. I had a folding table that served as my desk, a mattress on the floor, and walls covered with printed spreadsheets, market research, and motivational quotes I'd written myself during particularly dark moments. The refrigerator hummed loudly in the corner, half empty except for leftover takeout containers and energy drinks that had become my primary source of nutrition. My phone buzzed with notifications from Instagram. More posts from my cousin's Marcus showing off his brand new BMW M4. The metallic blue paint gleaming under the dealership lights, complete with a caption about hard work paying off, and 3 flame emojis. Jessica was flaunting her designer handbags from her latest shopping spree in Soho, each bag worth more than I spent on food in 2 months. Arranged artfully on her king-size bed in her Tribeca apartment, Tyler was posting videos from his 3rd vacation this year, this time in the Bahamas, showing off crystal clear waters and poolside cocktails. That probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The comments were always the same: living the dream, goals, so jealous, teach me your ways. Each notification felt like a small knife twisting in my chest, reminding me of how different our realities were. They had followers who hung on their every post, while my own social media presence was practically non-existent. Not because I didn't understand the platforms, but because I had nothing to show off. Yet, I scrolled past their posts without liking or commenting. What was the point? They lived in a different world, a world where money seemed to flow like water, where success was measured by the price tags on your clothes and the horsepower under your hood. Meanwhile, I was eating ramen noodles for the 4th night in a row, calculating whether I could afford both rent and groceries this month. The worst part wasn't the financial struggle. It was the family gatherings. Last month's barbecue at Uncle Robert's house in Westchester still burned in my memory, like a fresh wound. The invitation itself had been delivered with that particular tone family members use when they feel obligated to include someone out of politeness rather than genuine desire for their company. I'd pulled up in my beat-up 2008 Honda Civic, the engine making that concerning rattling sound that I couldn't afford to fix, black smoke occasionally puffing from the exhaust pipe. Like a dying breath, the contrast was stark and deliberately intimidating there. Gleaming luxury cars lined the circular driveway like a high-end car show, while my rust-spotted sedan looked like it belonged in a junkyard. Marcus's BMW sat next to Tyler's new Audi Q7, which was parked beside Jessica's leased Mercedes C-Class. Even Uncle Robert's driveway seemed to judge my vehicle, the pristine concrete making the oil stains from my car all the more visible. The house itself was a monument to upper-middle-class success: manicured lawns, professional landscaping, a swimming pool that sparkled in the afternoon sun, and a deck that could have hosted a small wedding. Walking from my car to the front door felt like a walk of shame, especially when I noticed curtains twitching in the windows as family members watched my arrival. "Oh, look who finally showed up," Marcus had said, not bothering to lower his voice. He was leaning against his BMW, surrounded by Tyler and Jessica. "Did the car make it okay? I was worried you might have to walk here." The laughter that followed felt like needles in my chest, but I forced a smile and walked past them, pretending I hadn't heard the whispered comments that followed. "I heard he's still living in that tiny place in Queens," Jessica had murmured to someone behind me. "Yeah, and working at that dead-end job. What does he even do again? Some kind of customer service thing? I don't know. But Aunt Linda is so embarrassed. She won't even talk about what he does for work anymore." The thing is, they weren't entirely wrong. My day job was answering customer service calls. For a telecommunications company, 8 hours of dealing with angry customers, complaining about their internet speeds or overcharged bills. It paid just enough to cover my basic expenses, but barely. The real work, the work I believed in, happened after hours. For the past 2 years, I'd been building something they couldn't see because they never bothered to look beyond the surface. While they were sleeping, I was devouring every piece of content I could find about e-commerce, digital marketing, supply chain management, and customer acquisition. While they were spending money on things that would lose value the moment they bought them, I was investing in knowledge, in skills, in a future they couldn't imagine. My education happened in the margins of my life. During lunch breaks at my customer service job, I'd watch YouTube videos about conversion rate optimization. On subway rides to and from work, I'd listen to podcasts featuring successful entrepreneurs who'd built empires from nothing. Late at night, when the city finally quieted down, I'd study successful Amazon listings, analyze what made certain products go viral, and research emerging market trends that bigger companies were too slow to recognize. I'd started small, really small, a dropshipping business that barely broke even for the first 6 months, selling phone accessories to college students who were looking for cheap alternatives to overpriced brand name products. The profit margins were razor thin, sometimes as low as $2 per sale, but I treated each transaction like a masterclass in business fundamentals. I learned about customer psychology, inventory management, shipping logistics, and the delicate art of pricing products competitively while still maintaining profitability. The dropshipping business eventually started generating modest profits, not enough to quit my day job, but enough to reinvest in better products, better marketing, better systems. I expanded into affiliate marketing, then into creating my own products. Each stream was small, but together they were building something bigger. My cousins saw none of this. To them, I was just the broke one, the family member they felt sorry for. The cautionary tale parents would tell their kids about what happens when you don't apply yourself in school or choose the wrong career path. You know what your problem is, Tyler had said during that same barbecue after a few too many beers. You don't think big enough. You're too comfortable being average. Some people are just meant to be followers, not leaders. I'd bitten my tongue so hard I tasted blood. If only he knew that while he was posting vacation photos, I was studying conversion rates and optimizing sales funnels while he was sleeping. And on weekends, I was researching new market opportunities and building partnerships with suppliers, while he was spending his inheritance from our grandmother on toys and experiences. I was reinvesting every penny I made back into my growing business empire. But I kept quiet. I'd learned early that there was no point in trying to explain my vision to people who couldn't see past the next weekend. They measured success by what you could show off, not by what you were building for the future. The rain continued to pound against my window as I returned to my laptop screen. My latest venture was starting to show real promise, a niche e-commerce store, targeting a specific demographic that the big retailers were ignoring. The numbers were encouraging, very encouraging. I glanced at the time, 3:23 a.m., in 4 hours. I'd have to be up and dressed for another day of customer service calls. But tonight, like every night, the sacrifice felt worth it. Every late night, every skipped meal, every family gathering where I had to swallow my pride, it was all building towards something they couldn't imagine. My phone buzzed again. Another post from Marcus, this time showing off some expensive watch he'd just bought. The caption read, "Hard work pays off. #blessed, #success, #living my best life." I almost laughed. Hard work. If only he knew what hard work actually looked like. I closed Instagram and returned to my spreadsheets. The numbers didn't lie, even if they weren't impressive enough yet to silence the whispers. But they were growing, steadily, consistently. Growing. One day, I told myself those whispers would turn into something else entirely. One day, they'd see what I'd been building in the shadows while they were busy performing their success. For social media, I just had to keep grinding, keep building, keep believing in something bigger than their small-minded definition of success. The rain finally started to soften as dawn approached, and I allowed myself a small smile. Let them call me the broke one for now. They had no idea what was coming. 6 months later, the autumn air in New York was crisp and full of possibility. The leaves in Central Park were turning brilliant shades of gold and red, but I barely noticed. I was too busy watching my business metrics climb higher each week. My studio apartment had transformed into a command center of success, with multiple monitors displaying real-time sales data, inventory levels, and customer analytics. The customer service job was now just a memory, but the experience of walking away from that office would stay with me forever. I'd finally reached the point where my online businesses generated enough consistent income to replace my salary, plus a healthy margin for growth that gave me confidence in my decision. The moment I walked out of that fluorescent-lit building for the last time, knowing I'd never have to deal with another angry customer complaining about their cable bill or internet speed, felt like the first real breath I'd taken in years. The office had been soul-crushing in ways that went beyond just the monotonous work. The beige cubicles, the perpetual smell of microwaved lunches, the motivational posters that felt more like mockery than inspiration, all of it represented a version of life that I'd been desperate to escape. My supervisor, a middle-aged man who seemed to take pleasure in reminding everyone that this is the real world, had actually seemed offended when I gave my 2 weeks' notice. "You know," he'd said, leaning back in his chair with a smug expression, "most people who leave here thinking they're going to start their own business end up coming back within 6 months, begging for their old job. The grass isn't always greener." I'd smiled politely and thanked him for the advice, but inside I was calculating the revenue I'd generated the previous month, more than 3 times what he probably made as a supervisor. The irony wasn't lost on me that he was dispensing wisdom about the real world, while I was already living in a reality he couldn't comprehend. But the best part, my family still had no idea. At Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house in Brooklyn, the same old dynamics played out like a scripted reality show. Uncle Robert held court at the head of the table, talking about his latest real estate investment. Aunt Patricia bragged about Jessica's new job at a marketing firm. "She's making 6 figures already. Can you believe it?" While Jessica smiled smugly and played with her new iPhone. Marcus, now sporting a Rolex that probably cost more than most people's cars, dominated the conversation with stories about his latest business ventures. He worked in sales for his father-in-law's construction company, which meant he had access to deals and connections that most people could only dream of. Every story was calculated to impress, every detail designed to reinforce his position as the family's golden boy. "We just closed a contract worth $2 million, he announced between bites of turkey. "I'm looking at a serious bonus this quarter. Might finally upgrade to that Porsche I've been eyeing." Tyler nodded approvingly. From across the table, he'd recently been promoted to assistant manager at the bank where he worked, which came with a modest salary increase that he talked about like he'd won the lottery. "That's incredible, man," Tyler said. "You're really killing it. Some of us are still working our way up the ladder, you know." His eyes drifted toward me with that familiar mixture of pity and condescension. I kept eating, saying nothing. Let them think what they wanted to think. "What about you?" Aunt Patricia asked, turning her attention to me with the tone someone might use when asking about a sick relative. "Are you still? What was it you were doing again?" The table went quiet, all eyes on me, waiting for my response. I could feel their expectation of disappointment, their anticipation of hearing about my continued struggles. "I'm working on some projects," I said simply, cutting into my turkey, "keeping busy." Marcus snorted. "Projects, that's one way to put it." The comment earned a few chuckles from around the table. "You know," Uncle Robert interjected with the air of someone dispensing wisdom, "there's nothing wrong with having hobbies, but at some point, you need to focus on building a real career. The economy is good right now, but that won't last forever. You should be thinking about stability, benefits, retirement planning." I nodded politely, but inside I was calculating numbers they couldn't imagine. My projects had generated more revenue in the past month than Uncle Robert's stable government job. Paid him in 6 months, my profit margins were higher than Marcus's. Commission rates, My growth trajectory was steeper than any corporate ladder Tyler would ever climb. But I said none of this. Instead, I listened to Jessica talk about her entry-level marketing position like she was running the company, and watched Tyler show off photos from his latest weekend getaway. Funded by credit cards and family money, the real turning point had happened 3 months earlier, when one of my product lines unexpectedly went viral in a way that changed everything. A fitness accessory I'd been testing in a small niche market, a resistance band system, designed specifically for apartment dwellers who couldn't afford gym memberships, suddenly caught the attention of a major fitness influencer with over 2 million followers. It started with a single Instagram story where she mentioned how much she loved the products, portability, and effectiveness. Within hours, my notification dashboard was lighting up like a Christmas tree. Sales that had been trickling in at maybe 50 units per week suddenly exploded to several hundred units per day, then over 1,000 units per day by the end of the first week. The surge lasted for 3 weeks, during which I barely slept as I scrambled to manage inventory, customer service, shipping, logistics, and supply chain challenges I'd never encountered before. I was literally learning how to scale a business in real time, making phone calls to suppliers at 3 a.m., negotiating expedited shipping rates, and setting up automated customer service systems to handle the volume. But by the time the initial viral wave settled, I'd used the momentum to expand into related products, secure better supplier relationships with manufacturers across 3 countries, and build a customer base that continued to grow organically through word of mouth and repeat purchases. What had started as a side hustle was now generating serious money, not just enough to live comfortably, but enough to invest in bigger opportunities and take calculated risks that could multiply my success exponentially. I'd quietly moved out of my studio apartment and into a spacious 1-bedroom in Manhattan. Nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention, but a significant upgrade that gave me room to think and plan. I'd paid cash, avoiding the need for credit checks or cosigners that might tip off my family to my changing circumstances. The best part was the freedom. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't worried about making rent. I wasn't choosing between groceries and gas money. I wasn't staying up late because I had to, but because I wanted to, because I was excited about what I was building. But I kept living like nothing had changed. Same clothes, same low-key lifestyle, same quiet demeanor at family gatherings. The difference was that now it was a choice, not a necessity. After dinner, I found myself on the back porch with my father, looking out at the small garden my mother had planted earlier in the year. The November air was cold but refreshing after the stuffy atmosphere inside. "They don't mean any harm, you know," my father said quietly. "Your cousins, they don't understand what you're doing." I looked at him, surprised by the comment. My father had always been supportive, but never particularly vocal about family dynamics. "They think success looks one way," he continued. "Big salary, fancy car, impressive job title. But some of the most successful people I've known were the ones who built something from nothing, quietly, without fanfare." "What makes you say that?" I asked. He smiled. "Your mother and I aren't blind. We know you're up to something. You've always been different from them, more thoughtful, more strategic. They see the surface. You see the foundation." I didn't confirm or deny anything, but I felt a warmth spread through my chest. At least someone in the family understood that appearances weren't everything. As the evening wound down and relatives started heading home, Marcus made one final show of generosity. "Hey," he said, pulling me aside as I was getting ready to leave, "if you ever need anything, to help you get back on your feet, just let me know. Family helps family, right?" The offer was delivered with a patronizing smile that made my skin crawl, but I just nodded and thanked him for thinking of me. If he only knew. On the subway ride back to Manhattan, I pulled out my phone and checked my business dashboard. Sales were up 23% from the previous week. My inventory was moving faster than I could restock it. My profit margins were healthy and growing. In 3 days, I had a meeting scheduled with a potential investor who was interested in helping me scale one of my most promising product lines. The preliminary discussions suggested a partnership that could multiply my current success by a factor of 10, but my family would hear none of this. They'd continue to see what they wanted to see, believe what they wanted to believe, and now, that was exactly how I wanted it. Let them keep underestimating me. Let them keep assuming that success had to look like their version of success. While they were focused on impressing each other, I was building something that would impress the only person who mattered, myself. The train pulled into my station, and I walked out into the crisp Manhattan night, surrounded by the energy of a city that never sleeps and never stops creating opportunities for those willing to work for them. Tomorrow, I had calls scheduled with suppliers in 3 different countries, a product launch to finalize, and a marketing campaign to optimize. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was mine, and it was working better than they could ever imagine. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March, just as spring was starting to breathe life back into New York City. I was in my new office, a sleek space in Midtown that I'd rented after my business had grown beyond what I could manage from my apartment. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the Hudson River, and the morning sun cast long shadows across my desk as I reviewed the latest quarterly reports. The numbers were staggering, even to me. What had started as a small drop-shipping operation had evolved into a multifaceted e-commerce empire. I now owned 3 separate businesses: the original fitness accessory line that had first gone viral, a tech gadgets company that supplied small retailers across the country, and a consulting firm that helped other entrepreneurs scale their online businesses. The consulting firm had been an unexpected goldmine that emerged from my success in ways I never could have planned. Other business owners, many of them struggling with the same challenges I'd faced during my early days, were willing to pay premium rates for the systems and strategies I'd developed through years of trial and error. What I'd learned in my cramped studio apartment, working until dawn while my cousins slept comfortably in their beds, was now valuable intellectual property that companies paid thousands of dollars to access. The irony was delicious. Entrepreneurs who had MBA degrees from prestigious universities, who had started their businesses with significant family funding and professional networks, were now paying me, the family failure, to teach them how to actually make money online. I'd created detailed frameworks for everything from product research and supplier vetting to customer acquisition and scaling operations. Each consultation session felt like validation for every sleepless night, every ramen noodle dinner, every family gathering where I'd felt inadequate. My client roster was growing rapidly, including a former hedge fund manager who'd burned through $100,000 trying to launch an e-commerce business before hiring me to fix his fundamental mistakes, and a tech startup founder who'd raised $500,000 in venture capital but couldn't figure out why their customer acquisition costs were so high. In 6 months, I'd helped them reduce their costs by 60% while doubling their conversion rates. My phone buzzed with a text from my accountant. "Q1 numbers are final. Call me when you get a chance. You're going to like what you see." I was about to call him back when my personal phone rang. The caller ID showed Marcus's name, which was unusual. We rarely spoke outside of family gatherings, and when we did, it was usually him calling to boast about some new acquisition or achievement. "Hey, cousin," he said when I answered, but his usual cocky tone was missing. Instead, he sounded strained. "How's everything going with you?" "Can't complain," I replied, leaning back in my ergonomic office chair. "What's up?" There was a pause, longer than normal. I could hear voices in the background, the kind of hushed, urgent conversation that happens when something serious is being discussed. "Listen, I was wondering if we could meet up sometime soon. Maybe grab coffee or something. There's something I wanted to talk to you about." This was definitely not the Marcus I was used to. The Marcus I knew didn't ask for coffee, meetings, or speak in tentative, almost nervous tones. "Sure," I said. "Everything okay?" Yeah, everything's fine. Just some business stuff I wanted to run by you, get a different perspective." We agreed to meet the next day at a coffee shop in Midtown, not far from my office. After hanging up, I sat back and wondered what could possibly be going on. Marcus asking for my perspective on business matters was like a professional chef asking for cooking advice from someone who lived on microwave dinners. The next morning, I arrived at the coffee shop a few minutes early and chose a table near the window. The place was busy with the usual crowd of professionals grabbing their caffeine fix before heading to their offices. I ordered my usual black coffee, no sugar, and waited. Marcus walked in exactly on time, but he looked different in ways that went beyond just physical appearance. His usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that even his expensive skincare routine couldn't hide. He was still wearing designer clothes, a navy blue blazer that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, but they looked rumpled, like he'd slept in them or had been wearing the same outfit for multiple days. More telling was his body language. The confident swagger that had defined him at every family gathering was gone, replaced by the uncertain movements of someone who was trying to maintain composure. While dealing with internal chaos, he kept checking his phone compulsively, his fingers drumming nervously on the table, and his eyes darted around the coffee shop like he was worried about being recognized or overheard. He was still Marcus, still tall, still conventionally handsome, still carrying himself with the remnants of his usual confidence, but there was a fragility there that I'd never seen before. It was like watching a perfectly polished facade beginning to crack under pressure, revealing the very human fears and insecurities that lived underneath. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. He ordered some complicated coffee drink with multiple shots of espresso, which was also unusual. The Marcus I knew was more of a green juice and protein smoothie type. "No problem," I said. "So what's this business thing you wanted to discuss?" He fidgeted with his phone for a moment, then put it face down on the table. "Look, I'm going to be straight with you. Things are complicated right now." "What kind of complicated?" Marcus ran his hand through his hair, messing it up even more. "The construction business is going through a rough patch. Some of our big contracts fell through, and we're having cash flow issues. Dad's been scrambling to keep things afloat, but..." He trailed off, staring out the window at the busy street. I waited for him to continue. "The thing is, I made some personal investments based on bonuses I was expecting to get. Big investments. And now those bonuses aren't coming, but the payments are still due." The picture was starting to become clear. Marcus, who had always lived like there was no tomorrow, had finally run into tomorrow. "How big are we talking?" I asked. "Big enough that I can't handle it with my regular salary. I've already sold the BMW and downgraded to something more practical, but it's not enough. The Rolex is going up for sale this week." I tried to keep my expression neutral, but inside I was amazed. Marcus was selling his toys, the very symbols of success he'd used to lord over the rest of us. "For years, I've talked to everyone I can think of," he continued. "Banks, friends, other family members. But the banks won't lend me what I need without collateral I don't have, and everyone else is either tapped out or what? Or they're not in a position to help with this kind of money." There it was. He needed serious cash, not just a few $1,000s to cover expenses. This was the kind of problem that required real financial resources. "So what exactly are you asking me?" I said, though I was pretty sure I knew where this was heading. Marcus looked directly at me for the first time since sitting down. "I need to borrow $50,000. The number hung in the air between us like a challenge. $50,000. It was more money than Marcus had ever imagined I could access, let alone lend to someone else. $50,000, I repeated, as if I was trying to process the enormity of the request. "I know it's a lot," he said quickly, "and I know you probably think I'm crazy for even asking. But I'm desperate here. If I can't cover these payments, I'm looking at bankruptcy. And I'll pay you back with interest, good interest, better than any bank would give you." I took a sip of my coffee, buying time to think. This was the moment I'd imagined countless times over the past few years. The moment when the tables would turn, when the family member who had mocked my struggles would come to me asking for help. But now that it was actually happening, I felt something I hadn't expected: sadness. Not for Marcus specifically, but for the whole situation. Here was someone who had spent years measuring his worth by his possessions, and now those same possessions were being stripped away one by one. Marcus, I said finally, can I ask you something? Sure. When you made all those comments about me being broke, about my projects not being real work, did you ever wonder what I was actually doing? His face flushed slightly. Look, if this is about the family stuff, I'm sorry. I know some of the things we said were probably hurtful, but I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I interrupted. I'm genuinely curious. Did you ever actually ask what I was building? Marcus looked confused. Building, for the past 3 years, while you guys were talking about my dead-end job and my beat-up car, I was building businesses, multiple businesses. I was working 18-hour days, learning everything I could about e-commerce, marketing, scaling operations. I was investing every penny I made back into growth. His confusion was growing. I don't understand. You were working customer service. That was my day job. It paid the bills while I built something bigger at night and on weekends and every spare moment I had. I pulled out my phone and showed him my business dashboard, real-time sales numbers, profit margins, growth charts that painted a picture of success that dwarfed anything he'd achieved in his traditional job. Marcus stared at the screen, his eyes widening as he processed what he was seeing. These numbers, this is monthly revenue? Weekly. His voice cracked slightly. But how is that possible? You drive a Honda Civic. I drove a Honda Civic because I was reinvesting my profits instead of spending them on depreciating assets. I was building equity instead of buying status symbols. The coffee shop suddenly felt very quiet, despite the crowd of people around. U.S. Marcus looked like someone had just explained to him that everything he thought he knew about gravy. Ty was wrong. So when I asked for $50,000, he said slowly, you asked someone who could write that check without thinking twice about it. Marcus buried his face in his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were red. God, I'm such an idiot. All those times we made fun of you, called you the broke one, and you were actually building something real. We sat in silence for a moment. The morning rush was beginning to thin out, and the coffee shop was transitioning from its frantic, early energy to a more relaxed mid-morning vibe. So, Marcus said finally, what's your answer? I looked at him across the table, this person who had spent years making me feel small, who had used his family connections and inherited advantages to create a lifestyle built on debt and false confidence. Part of me wanted to savor this moment, to let him squirm while I held all the power. But another part of me, the part that had been forged during those late nights in my studio apartment, recognized something familiar in his desperation. I remembered what it felt like to be afraid, to be uncertain about the future, to wonder if I was making the right choices. I'll lend you the money, I said. His relief was immediate and overwhelming. Really, you will? Thank you so much, but there are conditions. He nodded eagerly. Anything, whatever you want. First, this isn't a gift. It's a business loan with terms that reflect the risk I'm taking. You'll pay back $55,000 over 18 months. Done. Second, you're going to work for me. Marcus blinked. Work for you? I need someone to help with business development for my consulting firm. Someone who understands traditional business environments and can help me connect with potential clients. You'll work part-time while keeping your current job, and your wages will go toward paying back the loan. He was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. Working for his younger cousin, the family member he'd spent years looking down on, would be a massive adjustment to his self-image. Okay, he said finally, I can do that. Third, and this is non-negotiable, no more comments about anyone's financial situation at family gatherings. No more whispered conversations about who's successful and who isn't. That ends now. Marcus nodded solemnly. You have my word. I extended my hand across the table. Then we have a deal. As we shook hands, I could see something changing in Marcus's eyes. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like respect, and maybe, for the first time, a little bit of humility. Can I ask you something? He said as we prepared to leave. Sure. Why are you helping me? After everything we put you through, you could have just said no and walked away. I considered the question for a moment, because success isn't about proving other people wrong. It's about building something meaningful and using it to create opportunities for yourself and for others, even others who didn't believe in you. As we walked out of the coffee shop together, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it and frowned. "Jessica," he said. "She wants to know if we can all get together this weekend. Says she has some news to share. Good news or bad news." Marcus's expression was grim. "With the way things have been going lately, probably bad news." He had no idea how right he was. The call came from Tyler 2 days before Easter weekend. I was in my office, working on an expansion plan that would take my consulting business international, when my phone rang with his name on the display. "Hey, Tyler," I answered, leaning back in my chair. "How's everything?" "Not great, actually." His voice was tight, strained. "Listen, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I heard from Marcus that you helped him out with a loan situation. Word travels fast in families, especially when money is involved. Marcus had kept his word about the loan terms and had been working with me for the past month, helping to identify potential consulting clients in the construction and real estate industries. He was actually quite good at it. His network of connections and understanding of traditional business structures made him valuable in ways I hadn't anticipated." "Marcus mentioned something," I said carefully. "What's going on?" Tyler's sigh was audible through the phone. "I'm in trouble, real trouble. I made some investments that, well, they didn't work out the way I expected. And now I'm facing some serious consequences if I can't make things right." "What kind of investments?" "Cryptocurrency, mostly. I got caught up in the hype. Thought I could make quick money and pay off my student loans, maybe buy a house. I borrowed against my 401k, took out personal loans, even used credit cards to buy more when the prices dipped, thinking they'd bounce back." I could picture the scenario clearly. Tyler, always eager to find shortcuts to success, had gotten caught up in the speculation frenzy that had burned so many people over the past year. "How much are we talking about?" I asked. $45,000. "I know it's a lot, but I'm out of options. The bank is threatening to start proceedings, and if this goes bad, I could lose my job. They don't take kindly to financial instability in the banking industry." Another family member. Another crisis, but unlike Marcus's situation, which had been caused by overconfidence and poor planning, Tyler's problem stemmed from desperation and get-rich-quick thinking. It was almost poetic. The cousin who had mocked my slow, methodical approach to building wealth was now drowning because he'd tried to skip the hard work and jump straight to the rewards. "Tyler, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you remember that conversation we had at Uncle Robert's barbecue last year? You told me that some people are meant to be followers, not leaders." There was a long pause. "Yeah, I remember. What do you think makes someone a leader versus a follower?" I don't know. I guess I thought it was about confidence, about being willing to take risks. "Those are part of it," I agreed. "But the most important part is understanding the difference between smart risks and stupid risks. A smart risk is calculated, researched, backed by knowledge and preparation. A stupid risk is just gambling with money you can't afford to lose." Tyler was quiet, absorbing the lesson. I could hear the humility in his silence, a humility that hadn't been there during our previous conversations. "You're right," he said. "Finally, I was gambling, not investing. I thought I was being bold, but I was just being reckless. So here's what we're going to do," I said. "I'll help you with the loan, but like with Marcus, there are conditions. I'll do whatever you need. $48,000 paid back over 24 months. You'll also work for me, but in a different capacity. I need someone to help with financial analysis and market research for my investment decisions. Your background in banking actually makes you valuable for that kind of work. You'd trust me with that after what I just told you about my crypto disaster." "Tyler, smart people learn from their mistakes. Stupid people repeat them. The fact that you recognize what went wrong tells me you're capable of making better decisions in the future." We arranged to meet the following week to sign the paperwork and discuss his new role. As I hung up the phone, I realized that my family was slowly transforming from a group of people who had dismissed me into a team of people who were learning to see success differently. But the biggest shock was still coming. Easter dinner was held at my parents' house, the same dining room where I'd endured years of subtle condescension. and whispered comments about my financial situation. But this year, the dynamic was completely different. Marcus and Tyler both arrived looking more subdued than usual. Marcus was driving a modest sedan instead of his BMW, and Tyler's usual designer clothes had been replaced with more practical attire. They exchanged glances with me that were filled with a new kind of respect, the respect that comes from understanding that appearances can be deceiving. Jessica, however, seemed oblivious to the shift in family dynamics. She arrived fashionably late, carrying multiple shopping bags and wearing what looked like a brand new designer outfit. "Sorry I'm late," she announced to the room. "I was at the mall picking up a few things for my trip to Europe next month. You know how it is, so many choices, so little time." She settled into her usual spot at the table and immediately began regaling everyone with stories about her latest purchases and vacation plans. But something felt different about her performance. There was a manic quality to her enthusiasm, an edge to her laughter that hadn't been there before. Halfway through dinner, Uncle Robert asked the question that changed everything. "Jessica, how's work going? You've been talking a lot about shopping and traveling, but I don't think you've mentioned your job recently." Jessica's fork paused halfway to her mouth. For just a moment, her carefully maintained facade cracked, revealing something that looked like panic. Work is good," she said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. "Really good. Actually, that's part of what I wanted to talk to everyone about." She set down her fork and took a deep breath. "I have some news, some big news actually." The table went quiet. Based on her build-up, everyone was expecting an announcement about a promotion, maybe engagement news, or some other major life milestone. "I'm starting my own business," she said, forcing a bright smile. "A lifestyle consulting company, helping people optimize their personal brand and social media presence." The announcement was met with polite congratulations and questions about her business plan, but I noticed that she avoided giving specific details about funding, clients, or timeline. Her answers were vague and filled with buzzwords that sounded impressive, but didn't actually mean anything. After dinner, as people began to migrate to the living room, Jessica pulled me aside. "Can we talk?" she asked, and for the first time I could remember, she looked genuinely vulnerable. We stepped out onto the back porch, the same place where my father had given me quiet encouragement during that Thanksgiving dinner. "Months earlier, I heard about you helping Marcus and Tyler," she said without preamble. "Word gets around." Jessica laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah, especially when you're all of a sudden working together on business projects. It's pretty obvious something changed." She leaned against the porch railing, looking out at the small garden that was just beginning to show signs of spring growth. The truth is, I don't have a lifestyle consulting business. I don't have any business. I got fired 3 weeks ago. The admission hung in the air between us. Jessica, who had spent years projecting an image of effortless success, was finally acknowledging that the image wasn't real. "What happened?" I asked. "Budget cuts. Last hired, first fired." The marketing firm was struggling, and they had to let go of their junior staff. I saw it coming, but I kept telling myself it wouldn't happen to me. So the shopping, the vacation plans, credit cards, and my savings, which are now completely gone. She turned to face me, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. "I've been keeping up appearances because I didn't want anyone to know, but I can't keep this up much longer." Jessica had always been the cousin I understood the least, where Marcus was arrogant and Tyler was ambitious. Jessica seemed to float through life on charm and style, but now I was seeing the pressure she'd been under to maintain that image, the financial stress of trying to fund a lifestyle that was beyond her means. "How much do you need?" I asked. She looked surprised. "You'd consider helping me too? Family helps family, right? Isn't that what Marcus said?" Jessica's laugh was more genuine this time. "God, we really put you through hell, didn't we? All those years of treating you like the family charity case. And now the tables have turned. Completely turned. It's like some kind of cosmic joke." "Jessica, can I tell you something?" "Sure." "Success isn't about having the nicest clothes or taking the best vacations. It's about building something sustainable, something that can support the life you actually want to live, not just the image you want to project." She nodded slowly. I think I'm finally starting to understand that. But I don't know where to start. I don't have your business skills or Marcus's connections or Tyler's financial background. But you have something they don't have, I said. You understand personal branding and social media better than anyone in our family. You know how to create compelling content, how to engage with audiences, how to build a following. Jessica looked skeptical. That's just Instagram posts and TikTok videos. Jessica, social media marketing is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Companies are desperate to find people who can help them connect with their customers online. What you think of as just Instagram posts is actually a highly valuable skill set. I could see the wheels turning in her mind as she processed this new perspective on her abilities. The consulting business you mentioned, what if we made it real? Not lifestyle consulting, but social media consulting. Helping small businesses build their online presence, create engaging content, manage their digital marketing. Her eyes lit up for the first time all evening. You think that could actually work? I know it could work. In fact, I've been looking for someone to handle social media marketing for my businesses. I'm good at systems and strategy, but I'm terrible at creating the kind of content that actually engages people. So you're offering me a job. I'm offering you a partnership. You handle social media and content creation for my companies, and I'll teach you the business side, how to price your services, manage clients, scale operations. Once you're established, you can take on your own clients. Jessica was quiet for a moment, and I could see her mentally shifting from the image-focused version of success she'd been chasing to something more substantial. How much would I need to borrow to get started? She asked. Nothing. This isn't a loan situation like with Marcus and Tyler. This is a business partnership. I provide the initial investment and mentorship. You provide the skills and work. We split the profits until you're ready to go out on your own. Why would you do that for me, after everything? I thought about the question for a moment. Over the past few months, I'd gone from being the family's cautionary tale to being their financial lifeline. But somewhere along the way, something unexpected had happened. I'd stopped caring about proving them wrong and started caring about helping them succeed. Because I finally understand what real success looks like, I said. It's not about accumulating wealth just to have it. It's about using what you've built to create opportunities for other people. And because, despite all the years of comments and whispers, you're still family. Jessica wiped away a tear and smiled. You know, growing up, I always thought you were too quiet, too serious. I never realized you were actually the smartest one in the room. I wasn't smarter. I was just more focused on building something real instead of something that looked impressive. We went back inside to rejoin the family, but the entire dynamic had shifted. Marcus and Tyler were discussing a potential joint project they could work on together, combining Marcus's industry connections with Tyler's analytical skills. Uncle Robert was asking detailed questions about my businesses, genuinely interested in understanding how I'd built them. Even my parents seemed different, prouder, more confident in talking about their son's achievements. But the most significant change was in how I saw myself in relation to my family. For years, I'd felt like an outsider, someone who didn't fit their definition of success. Now I realized that their definition had been too narrow, too focused on short-term appearances instead of long-term value creation. As the evening wound down and people began preparing to leave, Marcus approached me. I have something to tell you, he said. The work I've been doing with you, helping with business development, I'm actually enjoying it more than my regular job. I'm learning things I never learned in traditional sales, such as how to create value instead of just extracting it. At the construction company, my job was basically to convince people to spend as much money as possible on projects they might not even need. But with your consulting firm, we're actually helping people solve real problems. Tyler joined our conversation. I've been thinking about that too. The research work you have me doing is making me look at investments completely differently. I'm starting to understand the difference between speculation and actual analysis. And Jessica's partnership idea, Marcus continued, it's brilliant. She's got skills that could actually help all of our businesses grow. I looked around the room at my family, people who months earlier had whispered about my failures and limitations. Now they were talking about collaboration, about building something together, about using their individual strengths to create collective success. You know what's funny? Tyler said. We spent all those years thinking we were successful because we had the right jobs and the right stuff, but we were all just one crisis away from falling apart. Whereas you built something that could weather any storm, Marcus added, and more importantly, something that could help other people weather their storms too. Jessica overheard the conversation and joined us. I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about sustainable success. I realize I've been living like I was always going to be 25 years old. No long-term planning, no real investment in skills or relationships that would matter 10 years from now. That's not uncommon, I said. Most people optimize for the short term because it's easier and more immediately gratifying. Building something lasting requires patience and delayed gratification. Things our generation isn't exactly known for, Tyler said with a rueful laugh. As we said our goodbyes and prepared to leave, my father pulled me aside one more time. I'm proud of you, he said simply, not just for what you've accomplished, but for how you've handled it. You could have used this situation to make them feel small, the way they made you feel. Instead, you're lifting them up. They're family, I said, and they weren't really trying to hurt me. They just didn't understand that success comes in different forms. Still, he said, what you're doing takes character. Your mother and I raised you right. Driving back to Manhattan that evening, I reflected on how completely my life had changed. A year ago, I was the family member people felt sorry for. Now I was the one they turned to for guidance and support. But the most important change wasn't in how they saw me, it was in how I saw success itself. For years, I'd been motivated primarily by the desire to prove them wrong, to show them that their dismissive attitude was misguided, that motivation had served its purpose, driving me to work harder and think more strategically than I might have otherwise. But now, success felt different. It felt more like responsibility than vindication. The money I'd made, the businesses I'd built, the knowledge I'd accumulated, all of it was more meaningful when it was used to create opportunities for other people. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Looking forward to our partnership. Then one from Tyler. The research project you gave me is fascinating. I'm learning more about real investing in 1 week than I learned in 2 years at the bank. And finally, one from Marcus. Got a lead on a potential consulting client. Big construction firm looking to optimize their operations. Let's talk tomorrow. 3 months later, our family dynamic had completely transformed in ways that would have been unimaginable just a year earlier. The change wasn't just superficial, it was fundamental, touching every aspect of how we related to each other and understood success itself. Marcus had left his father-in-law's construction company to work full-time with my consulting firm, a decision that had initially caused significant tension within his marriage and extended family. His wife's father had taken the departure personally, viewing it as ingratitude after years of providing Marcus with opportunities and financial stability. But when the first quarter's earnings reports showed that Marcus was making significantly more money as a consultant than he'd ever made in construction sales, the family tensions began to ease. His industry knowledge and relationship-building skills made him incredibly valuable in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. Marcus understood the language of traditional business environments, the unspoken rules of corporate culture, and the relationship dynamics that determined whether deals got made or fell apart. He could walk into a boardroom full of construction executives or real estate developers and immediately establish credibility in a way that I, despite my business success, simply couldn't match. Tyler had been promoted at his bank after applying the analytical techniques he'd learned working with me, earning recognition from his supervisors for developing more sophisticated risk assessment models and investment strategies. His colleagues were impressed by his ability to identify market trends and evaluate opportunities with a level of precision that set him apart from other analysts. At his level, the promotion came with a significant salary increase and, more importantly, the kind of respect from his peers that he'd been seeking throughout his career. But perhaps more significantly, Tyler was now managing his own investment portfolio with impressive results, applying the principles of calculated risk-taking and long-term value creation that he'd learned through his work with my businesses. His crypto disaster had taught him the difference between speculation and investment, and he'd channeled that hard-won wisdom into building a diversified portfolio that was growing steadily and sustainably. Jessica's social media consulting business was booming in ways that surprised everyone, including Jessica herself. She'd started with my companies as clients, learning the ropes of professional social media management, while developing her skills and building confidence in her abilities. But once she understood the business fundamentals, how to price her services, manage client expectations, deliver measurable results, and scale her operations, she'd expanded to work with other small businesses throughout the New York area. Her client roster now included to restaurants in Brooklyn that had seen their foot traffic increase by 40% after implementing her social media strategies, a boutique fitness studio in Manhattan that had doubled its membership base, and several retail stores that had successfully transitioned from purely brick-and-mortar operations to thriving online businesses. What had once been just Instagram posts and TikTok videos in her mind was now a legitimate business generating substantial revenue. More importantly, her approach to social media had evolved from superficial lifestyle content designed to generate envy and admiration to authentic business communication that created genuine value for her clients' customers. She'd learned to tell compelling stories about the businesses she worked with, to create content that educated and entertained rather than just showing off, and to build online communities around shared interests and values rather than materialistic aspiration. Her Instagram following had grown to over 75,000 people who were genuinely interested in her business advice and entrepreneurial journey, not just her lifestyle content. The comments on her posts had shifted from shallow compliments about her appearance or possessions to thoughtful questions about business strategy, marketing techniques, and entrepreneurial challenges. She'd accidentally become a role model for other young women who were trying to build something meaningful rather than just looking successful. The loans were being repaid ahead of schedule, not because I demanded it, but because everyone was earning more money than they'd expected. But the most satisfying change was in our family gatherings. Instead of conversations dominated by boasting and one-upmanship, we now talked about collaboration, about lessons learned, about goals for the future. The whispered comments and subtle put-downs had been replaced by genuine support and shared enthusiasm for each other's projects. That at our summer barbecue held at my new house in the Hamptons, though I'd made sure to keep it comfortable and welcoming rather than ostentatious or intimidating, the atmosphere was completely different from those painful gatherings of previous years. The house itself was a deliberate statement about my values, spacious and well-appointed, but focused on comfort and functionality rather than showing off wealth for its own sake. The kitchen was designed for actual cooking rather than just looking impressive, with professional-grade appliances that I used regularly rather than keeping as showpieces. The living areas were furnished with comfortable, durable pieces that invited conversation and relaxation. The backyard featured a pool and outdoor entertaining space, but the landscaping was natural and unpretentious rather than the kind of formal, manicured perfection that screamed expensive maintenance. What struck me most as I looked around the patio was how relaxed everyone seemed. Marcus was grilling burgers and hot dogs while discussing a potential partnership with Tyler, who was reviewing some market research on his tablet. Jessica was taking photos for one of her clients' social media accounts, but they were genuine, candid shots that captured the warmth of the gathering rather than staged lifestyle content designed to provoke envy. Uncle Robert and my father were engaged in a deep conversation about retirement planning, with Uncle Robert genuinely curious about the investment strategies that Tyler had been developing. Even the conversations felt different, less performative, more substantive, focused on collaboration and mutual support rather than competition and one-upmanship. To my nephew, he said, who taught us that real success isn't about what you can show off, but what you can build and share with others. As glasses clinked around the patio, I caught sight of my reflection in the sliding glass door leading to the house. The person looking back at me wasn't the broke cousin who'd been whispered about and pitied, but he also wasn't someone who'd let success change him into the kind of person who'd made him feel small in the first place. He was someone who'd learned that the best revenge isn't proving people wrong, it's proving them capable of being better than they thought they could be. And sometimes, if you're lucky, that includes proving it to yourself. The sun was setting over the water, casting golden light across the patio, where my family was laughing and planning their next collaborative project. In the distance, I could see boats heading back to shore after a day on the water, their lights twinkling like stars against the darkening sky. It had taken years of grinding, years of whispered comments and family gatherings where I felt like an outsider, years of choosing delayed gratification over immediate comfort. But sitting there, surrounded by family members who'd gone from dismissing my dreams to becoming part of them, I finally understood what success really meant. It wasn't about the money, though the money was nice. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong, though that had felt satisfying for a while. Success was about building something meaningful and using it to create possibilities for yourself and for the people you care about, even when they haven't always believed in you. And sometimes, the best part about turning the tables isn't the moment when people realize how wrong they were about you. It's the moment when you realize that their being wrong gave you the motivation to become someone better than you ever imagined you could be. As the evening continued and the conversation turned to plans for expanding our various business ventures, I smiled to myself. The broke cousin they'd whispered about was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned that true wealth isn't just about what you can accumulate. It's about what you can create and share, and that was a lesson worth more than any loan I could ever make.